Hey everybody, Case and I have got a great video for you today because we are out here in Austin, Texas, taking our first hands-on look at the all-new Lexus TX, a brand new nameplate for Lexus. And what is this vehicle, Case?
Well, this is their new three-row SUV. It's based on the Grand Highlander that we have already had a chance to make some videos about, but this vehicle is different in a lot of key ways, and we're going to look at all of that in this video today.
So this is a long three-row 6 or 7-seater SUV that competes with vehicles like the Acura MDX and of course the QX from Infiniti. And in this video, we're going to show you around the outside, the inside, talk about all the specs, talk about is it different enough than the Grand Highlander, talk about the engine options and everything you need to know about the TX. And let's start out with the front, Case, because the design on this TX is pretty different than other Lexus. So Lexus is known for their large and in charge spindle grille, but we've got a new approach at the spindle grille in this TX.
Yeah, I mean, it still has that general Lexus grille shape, so you can kind of recognize that shape, but it's not so much grille, you know, it's only parts of it that are grille, which I think helps a little bit because obviously the massive Lexus grilles have been a little controversial for some people.
Right, and especially like with the RX where it just takes up the whole front end, they wanted to de-emphasize the grille a little bit so it doesn't have a surround. The grille slats themselves are actually color-coded to the body, and I think it's a nice improvement. Now these headlights look a little bit Mazda to me, the way that they kind of, you know, jut out into the center of the vehicle, very angular.
Yeah, I can see that.
But without the spindle grille, it's not as iconic to the Lexus brand. So Lexus is working hard to make sure that you know immediately this is a Lexus. And let's move on to the wheels. So the wheels are one of the ways you can differentiate this Lexus from the Toyota.
Absolutely, and what's funny is that we have a relatively base model here. This is a 350, and what this comes with are these 20-inch wheels, which is generally a really big wheel, but look at how much sidewall we have. This really shows you actually how big this vehicle is. It really kind of dwarfs these 20-inch wheels.
Well, what's interesting is that the Grand Highlander tops out at the 20-inch wheel, whereas the TX starts out at the 20-inch wheel, and then you have an availability up to 22 inches on this TX. But as we make our way along the side, we do have a chrome line that extends across the top of the window line, and then we have a blacked out D-pillar, which kind of accentuates this floating roof design. And then as we make our way to the rear, we do have this blade style tail light, which I think looks really, really cool. And then a blacked out panel upon which Lexus is spelled out in bold letters. And then we have TX 350 all-wheel drive badging along the bottom right of the tailgate.
Yeah, and actually you can also fit these TXs with a towing package, and across the line, no matter which powertrain you get, that gets you 5,000 pounds of towing. But there's a lot more utility than just that.
Yeah, so they're really proud of the amount of space behind the third row, over 20 cubic feet. Lexus says they were able to fit 7 carry-on suitcases behind the third row. And this was an issue with previous three-row Lexuses, especially like the RXL, is there just wasn't a lot of space in the trunk if you had this thing loaded up, but now they're really emphasizing that. Underneath here too, we also have jack. This car does come with a spare tire, every version, except I think the plug-in hybrid, right, Case?
Yeah, it's just the plug-in hybrid that doesn't come with the spare tire because obviously there are weight and packaging concerns there. And then...
let's pop the hood, Case.
Oh, we're gonna pop the hood. So, yeah, here on this base model, the 350, and technically this isn't a full-on base model because there's different trims that you can get that get you some different features, most of which we'll look at on the inside. But here on this basically base model, we have a 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder that gets you 275 horsepower. You can also opt up for a hybrid version of that powertrain that gets you 366 horsepower, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and then the top line plug-in hybrid is actually available with a V6. So that's going to have a V6 in the hybrid system with over 400 horsepower. And that's a big difference between the Grand Highlander and the Lexus TX, is that the TX is available with the plug-in hybrid and of course the V6, whereas the Grand Highlander is only available, you know, as your standard hybrid. But Case, let me take the phone from you, and then we'll show the inside, where hopefully we'll see some other differences between the Lexus and the Toyota.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be one of the big things that differentiates them, and yeah, immediately stepping on the interior, you get very much of what you would expect from a Lexus product. So a lot of really high-end materials. a lot of really nice technology, and I'll go ahead and fire it up so we can show that off. So you've got this big 14-inch touchscreen right here that your climate dials are integrated into, which is a really nice look. They kind of impede into the bottom corners of the screen, which I think is a really cool bit of design. And then here in front of me, we have a 12.3-inch instrument cluster. So really nice looking screens, good technology, a really nice thick steering wheel with these paddles here. You have, the dash flanking your instrument cluster in this kind of sporty, modern way. And also some pretty cool things that they've done here with the center console, just to make things modular, as useful as they can be. It's a pretty neat interior layout. This was something that they were pretty excited about, where if your passenger has their arm here and maybe they're asleep, they said their thinking was they made it so that you can open up one side of this, get in there, get whatever you might need to get out of the center console, and do so without disturbing your passenger. Yeah, just some nice things. Mark Levinson audio system, wireless charger, bunch of USB-Cs.
I like
all
this
really
too.
nice.
You can scoot the wireless charger out of the way for another cubby. You know, this car has a lot of really useful family-friendly features. So Lexus makes several 3-row options. The GX, a new GX, a new LX, and this TX is aimed more for those that need a lot of room for families and maybe less off-road capability, right?
Yeah.
Still, of course, an all-wheel drive vehicle. Still is going to be able to tackle the snow, but this is not a trail-oriented vehicle. This is I've got a lot of kids and they need access to the third row kind of vehicle.
Yeah, and we also said that we would mention too some of the things that make this a more premium version of the TX 350, and part of that comes down to this massive sunroof that we've got going back here. So that is part of what separates it. Another thing that's important to note about configuration of the interior, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we actually jump in the back seat momentarily, but you can get these TX 350s as a 7-seater. Now, the Grand Highlander, you might be thinking you could actually get that as an 8-seater. Part of the reason that they only do 2 seats in the third row here is because they want to give those rear seat passengers more space to spread out. So it's not about packing into this car like sardines so much. And then they only do 6-seat configuration, so the captain's chairs when you get into the hybrid models, because the hybrid models are heavier, and so it's kind of a weight concern when it comes to how many seats they have for people in those heavier hybrids.
But certainly, like, material quality on the TX is much nicer than the Toyota. The 14-inch screen you can't get on the Toyota. 12.3 max on the Grand Highlander. So there are a lot of differences. It's not just a simple rebadging. But Case, let's do this. I'll give you the camera. You want to film from that side, and I'll hop in the second row, and we'll see what the second row looks and feels like.
Absolutely.
So as Case mentioned, this car can be had as a 7-seater because it's the non-hybrid. This particular one is the 6-seater with the captain's chairs. These are very premium feeling seats. You got these armrests that fold down. Good size amount of space, even at 6 feet tall, behind the first row. We also have the availability here of climate control, also rear heated seats, USB-C ports, and then we've got more configurability with these center cup holders, and apparently this whole bin also pops out. So if you just want to leave this at home so you've got space to crawl into the third row, that's a possibility as well. That's pretty cool. Another interesting thing, Case, is that this vehicle is built in Indiana, so it's US made alongside the Sienna and the Toyota Highlander. So it does have some US roots, which I like.
Yeah, and this is definitely a vehicle by Lexus's own account that is intended for the US market. So yeah, no, it's a good third row, but now we have to show what it's like to get, well, it's a good second row. We have to show now what it's like to get into the third row, and that's going to be my job. So if you do a long press there on the seat, then you can push it out of the way, and getting into the third row is never all that graceful, even for somebody as young and spry as I am, but yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a decent size opening, and once I'm actually back here, one of the cool things is I do have some cubbies, including a cup holder. I've got a USB-C port all the way back here, so it's not that you're completely without any amenities as a third row passenger. Also got a vent up here, which especially, I know it's October, but we're in Texas right now. It's 90 plus degrees, and having a vent back here is really killer.
I also noticed, Case, check this out. We have power recline on the third row.
Yeah.
Pretty luxurious stuff. You know, it used to be on other Lexus products, especially the RXL. The third row was a complete penalty box, but in this vehicle, even as a full-fledged adult, even though I don't sound like one, the third row is a really decent place to be. So it's a roomy space now instead of a problem.
One, you know, it's funny because always whenever they're giving you the glimpse of the vehicle and telling you all about what's great on it, the manufacturers, they use PR speak to talk about how great the vehicles are. And when they were saying that the third row is actually a pretty nice place to sit, I thought, well, I'm not sure I fully believe that. But now sitting in here with it reclined, I mean, if I was a whole lot taller, you can obviously move that seat a bit further forward. But if I was much taller, I might start running out of knee room. But I've got still a decent amount of headroom. And yeah, I mean, I'm 5'10". I'm not as tall as Tommy or not freakishly tall like Andre, but still actually pretty good back there. I like it.
They were also really proud of, in the development side, they were really proud of these little grab handles to get into the third row.
Exactly. It's something that makes it a little more ergonomic to get in and out. And then also pretty cool on your side, not only do you have these switches in the trunk, but you can use these to fold the third row either from the trunk or from the middle, which is really nice because there's a lot of vehicles that sometimes you'll be trying to load things into it and you have to walk around to wherever the switches are to actually fold those. The fact that you can do it either from the back or from the middle is pretty nice. And you can see they don't fold quite completely flat,
but pretty close.
Still gives you a good amount of space. It's not bad.
Yeah, and when you look at the pricing, right, vehicle starts high 50s. Easy to get into the $60,000, even $70,000 range, depending on the configuration. And you know what I'm impressed with? It doesn't necessarily feel like a Highlander that has a Lexus badge. I think they did a nice job of differentiating it from the style and specifically the powertrain side of things with the plug-in hybrid. But Case, you impressed?
I am. I mean, if it were my money, I think the GX is just personally a little bit more my style, but there's definitely a lot of draw to a vehicle like this TX because especially if you have a larger family, it's just going to be a really practical and comfortable vehicle to move people around in.
Yeah, so let us know what you guys think in the comments section below. As always, this has been Tommy.
And Case.
Be sure to stay tuned to alltfl.com. We have a full driving review coming shortly.